All right. Hope everyone's doing well today. You get your Bibles and go to Acts chapter 28. I have to say I'm quite excited about this, but like Mark said, I did this March right when COVID hit. We got to Paul right when he was coming toward the end of the shipwreck and that he was going to survive, and we didn't quite get to that point. I said, well, guys, once COVID, this crazy is over, we'll pick up on the other side as he did. Well, I don't know if the crazy is over, but at least we're back to Sunday school. So anyway, we have Acts 28, verse 1. 28, verse 1. And it says right here, and when they were escaped, and remember now, Paul, this is about 276 people, prisoners, Roman soldiers, sailors, captain of the ship, Paul. Luke is here. He seems to be writing from eyewitness account. In fact, I was doing some reading, and they were saying that this is one of the best written accounts of sea life in the Roman world, and that the terms that Luke uses, they're very precise, they're very unique, even in the Bible to this point, even words that you don't even see in a lot of normal Roman or Greek writing. So Luke was very precise in what he's writing here. It's a very descriptive detail what he's saying here about this whole ship sailing adventure of Paul. So anyway, though, so here they are. You remember they shipwrecked. And it says right here, and they were escaped, so they survived. And they knew that the island was called Melita. Today we call it Malta. And the barbarous people showed us no little kindness, for they kindled a fire and received us every one because of the present rain and because of the cold. And when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks and laid them on a fire, there came a viper out of the heat and fastened on his hand. And when the barbarians saw the venomous beast hang on his hand, they said among themselves, no doubt, this man is a murderer, whom though he hath escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffer him not to live. And he shook off the beast into the fire and felt no harm. Howbeit, they looked when he should have swollen or fallen down dead suddenly. I guess you could say this was almost like a spectator sport, I guess. They were all staring at him. But after they looked a great while, they saw no harm come to him, and they changed their minds and said that he was a god. And the same quarters were possession of a chief man of the island, whose name was Publius, who received us and lodged us 3 days courteously. And it came to pass that the father of Publius lay sick of fever and of bloody flux, to whom Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. So when this was done, others also which had the disease in the island came and were healed, who also honored us with many honors. And when we departed, they laded us with such things as were necessary. So here we have Paul. Paul has survived the storm. Now remember, they were in this storm 14 days. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a person that likes open water, ocean. I get sort of seasick. I don't do heights either. I have vertigo, so I don't do that. And I don't do watercraft. I remember one time Mom and Dad, we were out the Outer Banks, and they said, you know what, we're going to get one of these boats. And, it's one of those group boats, those charter boats. They take you over to the outer shores where you see the horses and the fun stuff. And they said, we're going to do it. So they rented it, and we were out there. We were sitting on the dock. And I remember just sitting there as the boat was waiting back and forth. I thought I was going to be sick as a dog. And from that point there, I realized maybe I wasn't called for the open sea. I'll stay back at port or the shore. But it says right here that these guys were in a storm for 14 days. I can imagine how sick they probably were after 14 days being in the storm. Paul says, if you look in about verse 3 or maybe verse 2, it says that it's cold and it's rainy, even once they get to the island. So 14 days being in the rain, storm, they're scared half to death. They had several strategies. You can go back. We don't have time to look at it, unfortunately. But if you look through 27, you can see Paul, the strategies they try to do to save their ship. They tried to lighten the load, which is your first priority. They tried to get rid of anything that was unnecessary, then everything that was necessary, and then finally they said, let's just dump Paul and the rest of the prisoners overboard. Let them drown, and let's see if we can save our ship. And Paul comes to him and says, well, if you read in 27, Paul says that an angel come to him. In chapter 27, an angel said, Paul, you're going to Rome. You got a job. Paul, you're going to Rome. I promise you, you're going to survive this. And this gives Paul confidence, and he shares that confidence with those other people. But he tells them, you got to stay in the ship. Now, a lot of people say that goes against protocol when your ship is breaking apart. You do not stay in the ship. You try to loose what you can, and you try to survive. He says, you stay in the ship. If you stay in it, you survive. If you don't, you die. And the captain there, the Roman, the centurion, tells people we're going to stay in the ship. And Paul keeps his word. His words come true. They survive. So, it says right here in verse 28, verse 1, so when they were escaped, they knew the island was called Malta. And they escaped today. It's Malta. There's a bay there. It's a deep water port. It's called St. Paul's Bay. And they're pretty sure this is where Paul would have landed. In fact, in the ancient world, there's only one island that even fits the description, and it would be Malta. And you can, in fact, there's a cave. They say when you go into the bay, and you'll see a cave over to the side of it, and they're pretty sure that's where the cave Paul probably would have spent the night for the first couple of nights when he first landed on the island. And so we know that they landed on it, and they found rest. They got to where they needed to be on the island. And I'm sure this was a great relief to Paul. Have you ever had one of those moments where you had a real relief moment? That you've gone through something hard, you've gone through something that's exhausting, and when it's over, you're like, whew, I made it. The Lord was good. I survived. The Lord kept his word to me. Back last fall, last time I taught this, said, guys, we'll get back together if the Lord allows it. COVID, we didn't know things that were going to happen. I didn't know things were going to happen in my own personal life. I know Christy, she got sick in September. It was just a normal week. And when she went sepsis on us, she's at the 3rd level right before you get to see the good Lord in heaven. And I remember, I was surprised. I was shocked. I was at that point of shock where you're beyond being able to pray. Have you ever been to that point where you cannot pray? The Holy Spirit has to take over and pray for you and utter things for you because you cannot pray because you're so disbelief what's happening. And I saw her. I saw her going out on me when she was at the hospital. And I remember the doctor telling us, one doctor said, I can't promise you she's going to survive. And he told that to me and her. He says, when you come in here, he said, you were mighty loved. He said, your heart, your liver, your kidneys, everything were failing on you. He said, I can't promise. We're sending you to Duke. He said, and I'm hoping for the best turnout possible. Well, it was this older doctor. Now, he didn't speak great English, but he gave me very encouraging words. He come to me when I was sitting outside where they were doing some stuff to her. He come to me, he said, she's going to make it. He said, I tell you she's going to make it. He said, in fact, I think he told me, he said, promise you she's going to make it. Now, the young doctor told me, I can't tell you. This older doctor told me, he said, I think she's going to make it. He said, I promise she's going to make it. He said, it's going to take her a long time. He said, but she'll get what she needs. And he left me with that little encouragement because we were both quietly discouraged. And then Christy goes to Duke and come to find out she was a lot worse than we realized. It took her another 3-4 days before we finally got her home. But I remember when we got her home, it was that moment. Lord, thank you for getting us through this storm. It was this relief. It was this calm. And then, it's just like, it's a peace that you go like, did I just go through that? Christy was like, did I just go through that? And you see the goodness of the Lord shape it. And the Lord carry you through it. Then Christmas time coming, Dad got COVID. And I thought we were going to lose him. And he was mighty sick. And there's people who say they don't believe in it. Trust me, I believe in it. And, and he was sick. And I tell you the truth, we thought we were going to lose him. And then, the Lord showed him mercy. And, you get this calm in your spirit. You're like, thank you, Lord. And I have a feeling this is what Paul was when he come across a storm. Because you got to remember, Paul's been 2 years in prison. 2 years plus in prison. He's been pretty much banished by his own people. And then now he's spent months at sea, 14 days in a storm that probably must have scared everyone half to death. In fact, it was enough that they want to throw the prisoners over to kill them, and they were just going to see if they could survive themselves. And now they come to Malta. They escaped. But it shows here. If you go back, and it says right here, if you go back and look at verse 24 through 26, it says right there. It says right here, I'll read it. It says right here, say, fear not, Paul. Thou must be brought before Caesar, and lo, God hath given thee all them that sail with thee. Wherefore, sirs, be of good cheer. For I believe God, and that it shall be even as it was told me. Howbeit, we must cast upon a certain island. Guys, I know Paul, when he got there, he thanked the Lord, the goodness that he made it to the island. And guys, we need to reflect and think upon our lives, how the Lord is good to us. And those moments, which are terrifying and are scary, and they seem to be much more prevalent today in the world we live in than they were just 3 years ago, we can thank the Lord and think how good he is to us, and his tender mercies, and his kindness, and his benevolence. But it says right here, so Paul made it to Malta. And I like this. It says, the barbarous people showed us no little kindness. Now, this word barbarian today, politically correct people would say, oh, that's wrong to call these people barbarians. Luke is just simply saying these people don't speak Greek. See, Luke would have spoken Greek. Paul would have spoken Greek. Probably they probably knew Latin as well. They knew Hebrew. Paul and Luke probably also knew certain other dialects of other languages. They're both very smart men. But it says right here, they don't speak Greek. So they're speaking the local language at this time. And these people, it says right here that obviously there must have been some lack of communication here between these two groups of people. But Luke does something. If you go back to about 27, and you look through the centurion, the Romans, the soldiers, if you look here, Luke tries to bring out that what we would call the unsaved, the pagan, the barbarians here, that he showed that they showed kindness to Paul. They were good to him. They were good to these people. And Luke made sure he brings that out. And I started thinking about this. There must be some point to this. If Luke is very, very careful in pointing out every time the centurion was good, and he tells you the centurion was good to Paul. These barbarians are very good to Paul. There's a point to that. And I think Paul's bringing here, I think number one is that it shows the kindness that unsaved people show. And it shows the benevolence that unpeople show. And he says, if unsaved people can do that, shouldn't saved people be more than that? Shouldn't we be more than the unsaved world? I'll be honest, guys, I've worked a lot in the Christian world. I really have. I've taught Christian schools here, there, everywhere. I'll be honest, this past year, I taught at a public charter school. I'll be honest, I met some of the best people I've ever met there. And I can tell you, those people are not saved. And it put me to shame. And I know those people are not saved. And it put me to shame because, man, how can these people be so nice, so good to you as a person? And I remember thinking to myself, man, these people are good people. They were good to me. And I was saying to myself, man, as Christians, we fall short. Yeah, I think sometimes we come across arrogant to the world. And I think this is what Paul's telling us here. Because if you go back and compare him to 27 and 26, if you look at the Jews, bashing on Christians. They're bashing on everybody. They think they're better. If you look at Festus and Felix and Agrippa, and sometimes I think we're more like those people. We think we have something secret that everybody else don't have. And I think sometimes when we look at unsaved people, we look at pagan people, barbarians, I think we come across snotty. We come across arrogant, like we're better than they are. And I think Luke is trying to say here, guys, they're kind. They house us. They bring us in. Don't we need to be better than that? Shouldn't we reach to a higher standard of being kind and loving to people? This year, teaching at a public charter school, it's not like I can just share the gospel with people like in Christian school. I'll be honest, you can. And when I teach history, I have to teach it different. I've always taught it from a Christian perspective. I teach it from a neutral position. And, I was, when you teach Buddhism, Hinduism, when you teach, you have to teach it from just this is what it is, this is what it believes, this is the historical perspective, how it comes about. But I had a girl this year, and she's a Hindu, and she talked to me about it. And I got to listen to her. I mean, her had good discussions. Me and her, we were get really into the religion, what it means to them. And they're burning with incense, and how she every morning wakes up with her family and they pray to a God with an elephant head. And I can't remember what the name is. I couldn't pronounce it probably if I tried. And in fact, when I was teaching on Hinduism, she would correct me in my Western thinking of it. And she'd tell me actually how it was believed. And I got to know her and talk to her. And and I was thinking, the only way to win this person is to show them kindness. The only way to ever win this girl is to actually show her kindness. And then maybe somewhere down the road, the gospel could be shared with her. And guys, I think we miss a great opportunity because we're not kind people. And I'm not just talking about here, I'm not just talking about me, I'm talking about Christianity as a whole in the world. I think we get an idea that we're better. And it says right here, Paul says, these barbarians, or Luke writes, these people were kind. They didn't know these people. They didn't know Paul. They didn't know Romans. They didn't know this boat coming. Most of these people were prisoners. I'm sure they looked like prisoners. I'm sure they had some kind of mark identification. Roman government was extremely efficient. They marked everything. In fact, they left us catalogs of things that they've marked. And I'm sure these people know they were prisoners. Because Malta had been controlled by the Romans since 245 BC. So, it was well under control. And it's right here that show them kindness. And guys, this is just my encouragement this week. How can we do better with that? How can we show people that we love them and that we want to reach out to them more than the world does? And that's something I have been strongly encouraged. But I also see something here too. I think Luke's trying to bring out. I think he's trying to show a contrast that not everyone in the ancient world was like Agrippa. Not everyone was like a Nero. If you said Nero, hopefully most people are not like Nero. People are not like these Jews that he had to just deal with, these Judaizers or these people back, the Pharisees. He's showing that there is a contrast, that these people actually were caring people that don't get the picture that a lot of people you deal with in the New Testament that mistreat Paul and beat him up and, whip him and do all kinds of things to him. I think Luke's trying to show a contrast that there were good people out there and that there are people that care. And there were people that were not saved that try to take care of Paul and these people. I think he's trying to bring out that contrast here, that not everyone in the ancient world was terribly mean and try to beat up people. And it says right here, so it says right here, it continues, and it says that they kindled us a fire, and they received every one of us because of the present rain, because of the cold. Now, if you study Malta is very Mediterranean weather. It's very nice. So Paul would have got there probably in wintertime, somewhere about November to January. Somewhere in that point. I read some said November. It looked like some point out maybe toward January. But he would have been there in wintertime. When, if there is going to be ugly, nasty weather, this would have been the point. So here he comes, he lands, it's cold, it's cloudy, it's rainy. The other day when we were at, we were at the beach and we had gone, we had a beautiful week last week down in Beaufort. Sun shining, warm, great. And we went to the pool though, the last day we went to the pool and we went in the morning. And I think this may be where everybody got their colds, I'm thinking. And I said, I didn't get the cold. I always tell Christy, I had so many colds as a kid. Now I'm pretty much immune to all of them now. But anyway, but I think the water was extremely cold. I mean, it was just cold. I don't think they had heaters on the pool that morning. I mean, it was cold. And I was like, whew, I wish I hadn't gotten this. And the kids, they were cold, and Chrissy was cold. And, and then we had to go run back to the room, and we were cold. And, when they landed, I'm sure they were weak. They were tired. And it doesn't seem like there was a sunshine waiting for them when they woke up. If you've ever studied, Castaways, or, if you ever watched the movies or read the books, like Christopher Robertson, the sun's always shining when they wake up on the beach. Or if you ever read, Robinson Crusoe, sun shining on the beach, or maybe Gilligan's Island, that's more my flair. But they wake up, it's always sunshine, it's always pretty weather. Well, that's not true here. Here, it's pretty nasty when he landed on the island. And it says that these people built a fire for him. And once again, it says that he said they took every one of us in. Remember, these people are prisoners. It's 276 people, and probably a good part of those are prisoners. And it says right here, and when Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks. Now, guys, let's do a little review of Paul. Paul has bad eyes. In fact, I've read different accounts that Paul said that, his vision, even Paul says when he's writing, I'm not able to write, or I wrote this myself, or I signed off myself. Sorry for my handwriting is so big. And, we think that his eyes were very blurry. We think, I've read some accounts where it said maybe his eyes had gook in them, and it could have squirted out gook. I don't know. They're shooting, but it could be. And it's pretty nasty stuff that Luke. So, we know Paul's eyesight was terrible. And it says right here that he's gathering sticks for the fire. All right, look at it now, guys. They just landed. They escaped. Remember the night before what they were doing. If you go up to 44 and 43, they are pretty much wading to the shore. The ship is breaking apart. You come down to 3. They land on the island. These people build them a fire. And guess what Paul's doing? He's picking up sticks. A man who can't see very well. A man who's a prisoner, who's been mistreated. He doesn't deserve to go wrong. Everybody says he's an innocent man. And what does it strike you funny? He's working. He's working. He's keeping himself busy. He's actually contributing to the situation. Even though he's tired, probably anybody would have excused him from this. Probably Paul, with his eyesight, it probably didn't take much for people to figure out that Paul couldn't see. From what it tells, he couldn't even see to write when he was writing some of the New Testament. He couldn't even hardly write it, at face value, at face in front of you. So obviously Paul here, but he's contributing. I think he's trying to set an example here. That, we can all play a part in the church. We can all play a part. There's no room to be lazy in the church. We should be setting an example for the world. We should be setting an example for our community. We should be setting an example for our church, for the people around us. Because it says nowhere around here that Paul had to pick up sticks. But I think it goes back to where Paul said, I'm not bound by anybody. I've learned how to do with, and I've learned to do without. He said, I haven't asked anybody of any financial help. He said, that's why I made tents, so I can provide for myself. He said, so no one can ever lay accuse to me that I took wasn't mine. And we look right here, Paul is picking up sticks. Now, guys, if nothing shows you more humility of a man than this man picking up sticks. Not only a man who's blind, but a man who is weather-beaten, a man who's been in prison for 2 years, a man who's been heavily discouraged, and here he's picking up sticks, contributing to the fire. Guys, there's 276 people. I'm sure they could get enough sticks for fire. I'm sure Luke would have gone and got the sticks for him. But it says here that Paul went and got the sticks and laid them on the fire, and there came a viper out of the heat and fastened on his hand. Now, here's the thing. There are no known snakes today in Malta. They haven't found any. Some people say, where did the snake come from? I don't know. Maybe it was miraculous. Could be. I believe the star when Christ was born was miraculous. Some people want to say it's in the stars. You can see it. I believe, hey, it was a miracle. Maybe God put it there to show an example to the people of Malta. Some people say it washed up with the debris on the shore. Paul was probably walking along the shore. He picked up a bundle of reeds. In fact, they say you can still see the reeds to this day in the St. Paul's Bay. It's still there, and you can still pick them up, and you can look at them. And maybe he got a sack of those. It had washed up. It was there. Some say, well, maybe over time there were snakes, and they're just not there anymore. Who knows? Whatever, there is a snake in the bundle of sticks. In the wood. The other day, I was weed eating. Now, I don't do snakes. I know some people love snakes. Even poisonous snakes. People will pick them up, move them, take them to them. I don't do that. It's a snake. It's a dead snake. And I know some of you respect black snakes, and you're like, oh, cute. Sorry, it's a dead snake in my yard. I mean, it doesn't survive. And so anyway, the other day I was weed eating, and all of a sudden, this little baby snake popped up. And it was right there, and he was going away from me. And it was like a little baby copperhead. And I said, I don't have my hood or shovel. So I said, I'll have my weed eater. So I took my weed eater, and I went, ew! And I'm telling you, you should see that thing. And I looked over, and he was just moving. I told Chris, I said, Christy, call Chris to get me the shovel. And I said, y'all, and I tell you, I overkilled a baby snake, but trust me, that thing was dead. I mean, he was gone. And so, I tell you the truth, Paul handled this a whole lot better than I would have, okay? I mean, if you look at Paul keeps his testimony with the snake biting him. I don't know if I could have done that, because snakes scare me. But anyway, so Paul has a snake, and when the barbarians saw the venomous beast hang on his hand, they said among themselves, no doubt this man is a murderer, whom hath escaped the sea, yet vengeance suffereth not to live. Guys, this is just justice. See, the Roman world was all about justice. If you did wrong, you paid the penalty. If you did right, you got rewarded. I mean, Rome had no problem with what they call law. In fact, Rome is known for their law. In fact, a lot of European countries still based on Roman law. You do this, you have freedom. If you do wrong, you get this. They said, this is what they think, oh, Paul, man, this storm must have been because of him, and the storm is trying to kill him, or a god or a goddess is trying to kill him, and because he survived the sea, this snake's going to finish it off for him. Paul has done something wrong. This dude is a murderer, and this is just justice. See, in the ancient world, they don't have any concept of mercy. They don't have any idea of the word humility or mercy or grace. That doesn't exist in their vocabulary in this time period. To them is, okay, you did this, this is what you get, this is your punishment. And so this would have been a total unique thing. And let's face it, when you get bit by a snake, I mean, if it's poisonous, you die or you get sick. So like the other day, what was that guy had the cobra? Was it in Raleigh? Was it zebra cobra, I think? Now that guy had a really weird hobby, okay? I'm not keeping snakes in my house. But this guy, these people thought this is he's getting what he deserves. And it says right here, And he shook off the beast into the fire, and no harm. He had no harm. I mean, it seems that Paul just simply shook it off, never flinched, never panicked, and he threw it back into the flames. Now, Paul must have had nerves of steel. Like I said, I don't do spiders, I don't do snakes, I don't do anything that crawls on me, okay? And I remember one time, like I said, I was laying on the swing, and I was enjoying myself. I felt something itch on my hand. I kept itching my hand. It was a black widow. I tell you guys, I don't believe in dancing, but I was dancing. And it was one of those moments. Black widows, I don't do that stuff. It says Paul just simply shook it off, and no harm come to him. And it says, but howbeit they looked when he should have swollen and fallen down dead suddenly. But they had a look at a great while, and they saw no harm come to him. They changed their minds and said that he was a god. You know, it says that he was a god. Here's these people. They're looking. But you know, I find this fascinating. This caught their attention. And obviously it was a spectator sport. Because if you watch, it makes it look like all these people are sitting around him watching him when he got bit to see if he would die. You know, it's sort of like, you know, sometimes there are certain people who like to sit around and watch bad things happen. Sort of like CNN, the news. You know, they like to watch bad things happen. And if they don't, they'll create it. And right here, it's like these people are sitting around watching to see if he dies. I mean, I'm sure it had to be sort of weird for Paul, all these people watching. I'm sure there were little kids coming up to the shoreline watching him saying, that's the guy who got bit by the snake. We're going to see how he dies. I mean, you know how little kids are? I see my own kids. I mean, they're always wanting to see something weird, strange, or gross. Anyway, so Paul here sits here, and it says that they changed their mind. This is the first major healing miracle, ever how you want to put it, that Paul has done for quite some time. Now, especially in the book of Acts. Now, you could read through his epistles, maybe find something here or there. But overall, Paul has not done anything like this in 2 or 3 years. And you got to remember, when Paul is in Athens and he's at other places, he will do healing. He will help people, but mainly he's preaching and he's arguing or debating them. Paul's doing full-out blown miracles here. Something he has not done in recent time, in 2 or 3 years. Because here he's in an area that Christianity hadn't reached yet. See, in other places, Christianity had already reached those areas. It had already spread. It had already taken growth. But here in Malta, there doesn't seem to have been any Christian or anything here. In fact, they had a temple to Juno, which was a goddess of fertility and other things. Sort of, I'm not quite sure in the ancient world where she fit in. She seemed to have a lot of different things that she was involved in, but there seemed to be no Christianity. So Paul had to capture these people's attention. And maybe because they were barbarians, they didn't speak Greek. Maybe Paul didn't speak the local dialect. So he had to use miracle here to really capture their attention. And today, I wouldn't go play with snakes to see if it worked for us like it does for Paul. You know, you read sometimes about that. I don't know if you guys read a little recently ago about the snake handler in Tennessee, that preacher in Tennessee. He had one of those poisonous snakes, and he was preaching, and he had a snake, and the snake bit him in the neck, and he almost died. And they took him to the hospital. They saved his life, and then he went back to the church the next week and got bit by the same snake again. And he said the Lord would heal him and stuff, but he almost died because he didn't make it to the hospital in time. This was for Paul. This isn't for us. And that's why I kill snakes. I don't play with snakes. Anyway, so it says right here, so in the same quarters was a possession of a chief man of the island, whose name was Publius. Now, I would say here, this guy probably, because of his name, It has a very Latin ring to it. He is probably an official from the Roman government. Now, he could have been a local guy that they put in charge, but I would say probably this is someone that they put in charge of the island, that he's some kind of government guy, and that they've given him this name, who received us and lodged us there 3 days. So now Paul has made it to the big time. Paul now has made it to the guy that is, he's probably the local guy in charge of the island, and it's probably the snake spread pretty fast. I would think so. If someone got bit by a snake and survived like this, I would think the word would spread pretty fast. And knowing Paul and knowing how these disciples work, this is probably not the only miracle that he had done up to this point. And you got to remember, we only get a snapshot. We only get 2 major stories in Malta. Paul's there for about 3 months. So I'm sure Paul did many things in Malta. And the same quarters was a possession of a chief man in the island, whose name was Publius, who received us. And it came to pass that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever and a bloody flux, to whom Paul entered in and prayed and laid his hands on him and healed him. Now, I will say here about Paul. Paul, this is what we call Malta. We believe this was Malta fever. Malta fever, it would still exist today if there wasn't modern antibiotics and stuff. It's a bacteria that grows in the goat's milk, which that's a big thing for them is the goats. And milk, and it's on the islands in the Mediterranean, the surrounding area, and it can give you a fever, and it can last a very long time. I was reading it can last up a year, couple years, depending on the person you are, and it just makes you feel like you have a consistent flu, and so it can be pretty bad. It can be pretty nasty sickness. From what I understand, very few people would die from it, but it can make you sick for a long time. And obviously this guy had been sick for a long time. And it said that Paul entered in, prayed, and laid his hands and healed him. Once again, this is something you have not seen from Paul in quite some time. It's probably going on 3 years since Paul has done any of this kind of miracle. And even then, if you read the book of Acts, you see miracles get less and less and less. If you read through the epistles, you see miracles get less, and less. And you see that Paul does more preaching and teaching and sharing the gospel. And as it says it's through love it's going to be spread. Through charity it's going to be spread. And tongues and all that's going to be passing away. And so you can see that. But where it's needed, it's still called out. And because you got to remember, Christianity has not made it here yet. Paul is setting the foundation for it here in Malta. So anyway, so it says right here, so when this was done, others which the disease in the island came and were healed, who also honored us with many honors. And when we departed, they laid with such things as were necessary. Now, there's one thing missing, guys, in all this passage. Everything, I know you guys have to step back with me now. When we talk about him going to Berea, him going to Thessalonica, him going to Athens. There's something in this, going to Corinth, there's something missing here in Malta. Paul does not do that, does everything else tells us about Paul. If anything, you can see it's missing in this. We see miracles, but there's missing something else. Anybody see what's missing? Yeah, well, probably no synagogue. There doesn't seem to be a heavy Jewish population. Can anybody tell me there's something Paul always does, though? And always sometimes, and gives us a shortened version of it, or at least gives us a summary or abbreviated version of what he says. It doesn't say he preached. It doesn't say he ever shared the gospel here. Now, from the miracles he shows us, and knowing Paul, I'm pretty sure he did. But it doesn't come out and say it. I think Paul probably shared the gospel, but probably had to take a different approach to it. And probably did. I remember he's there 3 months. We only get 2 stories. But probably Paul does. We're just not left the words that Paul shared. But whatever it is, these people seemed to have liked Paul. Paul seemed to have made inroads with these people. Because it said they honored us with many honors, and we departed, and they laded us with such things as were necessary. They gave to Paul. They gave to these 276 men. And you know what's I find funny that these 276 men all got back on the boat and they headed on. Some of these guys were prisoners. And it doesn't seem like any of them tried to escape. It doesn't seem like any of them tried to go their own route. It's like now they're continuing their journey. So anyway, so Paul says right here, and after 3 months we departed ship of Alexandria, and we wintered in the isle whose sign was Castor and Pollux. And landing at Syracuse, and Castor and Pollux, they're gods of the sailors. They're sort of like the good luck charm for sailors in that time period. And I don't know if you guys, I just love how Luke, he brings up these gods and goddesses, these areas that they would have known. And this really just gives you the context of the world they're living in, the pagan culture that they lived in and they dealt with. Because Luke sprinkles them all the way, especially if you go back to Athens. I mean, he's quoting all kinds of poetry, all kinds of writings and legends and Greek mythology, and Paul's combating each one. And here he's just talking about Castor and Pollux. Juno was the goddess of the Malta. And you can just see little tidbits where Luke's saying, hey, we're opposite of what they believe here. And landing at Syracuse, we tarried there 3 days. And we fetched a compass and came to Rhegium. And after 1 day set, we blew, and we came next to Puteoli. You can go through, you can look at the map, you can find all these guys. If you look at your Bible in the back of your map, in the back of your Bible, they're all there. And we found brethren, and were desired to tarry with them 7 days, and we so went toward Rome. And from thence, when the brethren heard of us, they come to meet us. And this is where I'm going to leave it here, guys, today. Paul's been on a journey. He's been on a long journey. Paul had been in prison for 2 years, limited who could be with him. Paul's ministry had sort of somewhat stalled him actually meeting and greeting and preaching and sharing the gospel with people as a whole. He's on this ship. He's lost at sea. He winds up in Malta. He's there 3 months. For a while, then he goes, and then they have to winter. But you know, here's the thing about Paul. Paul now gets to be with the brethren. They hear that he's come. So obviously Paul's reputation has spread throughout all of Rome by this point, because they know he's coming, and they go out and they meet him. And you know what? They come to encourage him. And guys, that should be something to us that we should be encouraging. Here's a man who has been on a journey, a very hard journey. And let's face it, he's going to Rome, guys. I mean, he knows what's going to happen to him in Rome when he faces Caesar. I mean, he doesn't question it. I mean, Nero is coming to the throne, and everybody knows Nero. There's much hostility in the Roman world about Christians, which we're going to look at when we get back next Sunday. I mean, he knows that. And the brethren come, and they meet him to encourage him. And you know what? I'm sure Paul encouraged them. They're building off each other, guys. Iron is sharpeneth iron. And you know, that's a beautiful thing. And that's the great thing, guys, that we have with each other. That we encourage each other and we build each other. We find joy in each other. I mean, I tell you guys, I miss church. When I'm not with you guys, when we're not together fellowshipping, I miss you guys. I'm like, I tell Christians, I can't wait to get back to church. And Christian's like, I can't wait to get back to church. And the kids say, well, they can't wait to get back to church. And you know, guys, that's the way it should be. That they come out, they're eager to meet Paul, and Paul is eager to meet them. Guys, we should be eager to be with each other. And you guys, let's go ahead and let's close in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I come to you, you're a great, wonderful God, Lord. May we love you. May we serve you. May we do your will. And Lord, just thank you for Paul. Thank you for his ministry. Thank you for the example he set for us, Lord, about sharing the gospel and being all that we can be for you. And may we just honor and glorify you throughout the week, and just may we do your will. In Jesus' name I pray.